Today is my second storytime day, and each story is going to be relatable or different. It just depends on what comes through. You can kind of see it as like a week-to-week basis kind of thing, because I rotate through my choices every 6 days, so yeah, roughly weekly. So yeah, I got one. So the story is about kingdoms. Mankind, in its long history of kingdoms and long history with kings, is that there has never been a real need for them under certain circumstances, especially if like what we have now. But when it comes to kingdoms and kings, it's usually, like everything was watered down, everything was pretty much terrible. It was the mid ages and everyone was having a bad time. But we never heard of anything magical about kingdoms. So, this story is about an actual magical kingdom. There was a king, and he himself was beloved and wise. Every day he would travel down to the markets, and he would always inquire about whose shop stall wasn't doing so well. And he would take those people aside and he would treat them to a buffet using all the ingredients from their shop. Some say the king was into alchemy. Others said that he was an evil magician who sold his soul for riches and treasures beyond compare. He always laughed at these stories, found them funny, entertaining even, that someone would discredit me by trying to give away my power to something so aloof, something so troublesome, he would say with a smirk. There was always different members of his court that would spread rumors about the king. They feared him. And they feared him for not what he was, or even who he was. It was how he was. Every day the king would be doing things that just didn't make sense. Amuse court gestures instead of the other way around. It did everything so differently in his court. And yet he was beloved. Everybody cared about him. And the thing that they couldn't understand the most, and hated above all else about their king, was the fact that he was never afraid of what others would take his sincere truths to be. He would always be honest with them. He would always look them in the eye, sternly, and lay out every last thing that he couldn't even possibly have known as the king. So these members of the court, they were weary of the king. They did not want to be met by his eye. Anytime he even inquired about them, they would hide. They would run. They would go somewhere other than the king's gaze. Somewhere where the king's gaze would never find them. And they found themselves muttering curses and considering the possibility of him being a witch or something worse. You see, this was a kingdom of magic. So they had done many different things to test, to see if this king was not so righteous and good, or as pure of heart as he should be. That he was possibly working with dark forces to find out different ways to mislead his countrymen. So they pursued this endeavor. They pursued it to the ends of the earth even. They sought different wizards and different alchemy, different works of art, and came up with nothing. Most magicians and many who worked in the field of magic, they all mused, laughed, nodded their heads after meeting the king. Anytime they asked, well, is he using magic? It may be a magic that you're not familiar with, they would always start with. But it's the magic that your kingdom needs, that all kingdoms need. I dare say, his magic is even more powerful than ours. Myself alone, my tools, or even all the guides that I call in, they would remark. A little here, a little there, different details, but it usually came down to the same thing. His magic is pure. It's not for his purpose. It's not for anybody's purpose, but for the king's purpose. And the king sees all. So flustered and angry and feeling dejected by these so-called magicians, so-called wayfinders, so-called guides, so-called whatever. These members of the court who've only known their power that they had by influence, by the largeness of their corn, by the size of their fields, by the bountiful bounty that their forefathers had found for them and have passed down through the years. They knew not what this magic was, or why everyone seemed so taken by the king. It must be dark magic. They convinced themselves, they decided, that they would use dark magic of their own. And you know, for the first time on this channel, I'm gonna leave this one on a cliffhanger. Seems that's the way the intuitives want it. So, till later.